This is My First Job in Sports web series, presented by SBRnet, your comprehensive source of sports data to the academic community. Here are the hosts of My First Job in Sports, Neil Schwartz and Mark Sullivan.
Hi, this is Neil, and welcome to episode 14 of My First Job in Sports. This is one of our special Get in the Game editions of My First Job in Sports. And before we get going with the show, I would like to congratulate my co-host, Mark Sullivan, who last week was inducted into the Running Hall of Fame. Mark, congratulations.
Well, Neil, you misspoke just a tiny bit. I wish I was inducted into the Running Hall of Fame. It was actually the Running Industry Hall of Fame. So I was honored for my business contributions, not my speed in the marathon.
Mark, I always thought you were an avid runner. No, I understand. That was my mistake. But Mark, I know how tirelessly you work and how tirelessly of an advocate you are for the running industry. So that is an honor that is well deserved and probably long overdue.
Well, look, it was a wonderful acknowledgement, and it was nice I could share it with my family and my friends in the business. So, yeah, I'm, certainly humbled and grateful both.
Mark, this is another one of our special Get in the Game editions of My First Job in Sports. So why don't you explain a little bit to our listeners and viewers, of course, what is Get in the Game and what's going on?
Yeah, I guess you could say Get in the Game is the child of My First Job in Sports, because you and I have been doing these interviews for a couple of years now.
Yes.
And again, the thirst for this information and the reaction to this series, I think, planted a seed in the back of our mind that there was an opportunity to do kind of a live version of this. And that's exactly what we're doing this October 6th through 8th in Baltimore at the Sheraton Inner Harbor. We are doing Get in the Game. We have some wonderful sponsors: Dick's Sporting Goods, On Running, Clark's, ASICS, the Ad Council, a whole bunch of sponsors. And the purpose of the event is to educate students about the industry and link them up with people who could potentially offer them jobs. So that's Get in the Game, October 6th through 8th in Baltimore, Sheraton Inner Harbor. Check it out, getinthegameconference.net.
Let's get to our interview today with Jordan McGrigg.
Hey, we are happy today to be joined by Jordan McGrigg. Jordan is the studio assistant to the daily digital producer for the New York Jets. I'm wearing my Jet Green in your honor today. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Jordan, Mark and I are really excited to have you on the show. As you know, we spoke to one of your mentor and someone that has helped guide you in show 13 and a half. But, before we get into a number of the questions and a lot of the things we want to know is that give us a little bit about your background. Where are you from? Where did you go to school? What are some of the things you've done? Mm-hmm. And that helps to kind of set the stage for us a little bit.
Okay. So my name is Jordan McGrigg, for those that missed it earlier. I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi, or as I like to call it, backwoods Mississippi. And my journey took us to 3 different states when I was younger. My dad is military. So in middle school, we ended up in Kentucky. And then at the latter part of middle school, I ended up in Virginia, which is where we went to high school and everything. And so eventually, as I was going through high school, I ended up going to one of the premier HBCUs, North Carolina A&T State University. And so while I was there, I noticed that one of my passions was football. And so I was on the team for a few years. And then my last 2 years, I ended up becoming a highlight specialist, as I like to call it, as well as a cameraman. And so that led me to where I am today in a nutshell, but we'll get into that as we get through the show.
Philip liked to mention something called, getting your reps in before you're ready. Tell us a little bit about, the path that you took and the things that you were able to do to help you get your reps in before you were ready for this big job with the Jets.
Right. So when I was in high school, I noticed that we never really had highlights as far as our players went. And we wasn't really a big school. We wasn't a well-known school, but we did have a lot of good players. And so with that being said, I was kind of the guy that was like, well, my freshman team is really good. We're like one of the known teams in the county or whatever. And so I went out my way and made a tape. And I was like, well, I kind of like making highlight tapes. And so eventually when I got into college, I kind of put that to the side. And so I ended up noticing that my time on the field wasn't going to be too long because I'm more smaller in stature. I was a great football player. Don't get it misconstrued though. But I did play receiver, and I did get recruited to play receiver at the school I was at. But that journey didn't last long. And so one day I went into the office, the football office, and I'm like, man, I love being around a team. These are like my brothers here. And the last thing I want to do is be away from the team. So what can I do? And so our social media guy at the time was like, well, we need more help with the cameras. And I'm like, well, I'm a journalism and mass comm student, so this is literally right up my alley. And so one thing led to another. I became his second in charge, and then I ended up becoming the highlight specialist as well. So I did that for about 2.5 years, and then eventually I ended up doing it for Guilford College as well as Dartmouth College. And again, if I never picked that up, then I honestly don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for picking up a camera or him taking a chance on me.
So, Jordan, interesting background. Love how you sort of got to where you got to. But tell us,
Mhm.
how did you go from Dartmouth to the Jets?
To the Jets. So, fun fact: when I started with Dartmouth, I actually was a teacher for 2 years, and so I ended up finding out this foundation, the McLendon Leadership Institute, and so they reached out to me through a couple of friends that I knew, and they asked me, "Yo, what field do you want to be in?" And I was like, "Sport broadcast, like easily." And so it was great timing on things because they were like, well, Dartmouth has a position opening up for content creation. Are you interested? And I'm like, well, first off, I don't even know where Dartmouth is. I'm from small town Mississippi. I can't even tell you where Dartmouth is. But Dartmouth is, of course, a premier college, and most know it's Ivy League. And so got in touch with the guy that was going to hire me and everything. And so we hit it off immediately. He was telling me about how the transition was going to be smooth, how he was going to help me, mentor me throughout the whole process. And I will say, if it wasn't for Dartmouth, I honestly wouldn't be with the Jets now because Dartmouth taught me everything I needed to know as far as like sports go. I really didn't have no much of any knowledge as far as like being at a premier school and being in sports broadcast. And so when it came time to switch over, my program itself ended, and so it was time for me to find a new job. And at the time, I was just looking for college jobs. I kind of put the Jets job when I applied, it was more so of like, the Jets not gonna look at me, little old me. And so within a few days, my boss now, he got back to me and was like, hey, you are one of our candidates, and we would like to hire you. And so that was one of the most life-changing things for me, to get the call from the Jets and seeing New York Jets on your phone. Like, only kids can imagine stuff like that, especially me being from Mississippi. Most don't make it out. And so when I do things, I make sure that I'm doing it with that standard of somebody's always watching and somebody's always looking up to me.
How did you get to the Jets? Out of curiosity, I mean, did you respond to something on LinkedIn, or how did it happen?
So there's a platform called Teamworks Online, and so I applied through it. And I applied over 1,000 apps on Teamworks Online, and I always felt like a lot of schools or teams or programs didn't really look at that until after I got hired by the Jets. And what I can't really say what made me stand out the most, but I will say during my interview process, once I got that chance, like I told my boss, like I was going to take full advantage, and they were only going to get the authentic me. And it was never going to be sugarcoated. It was never going to be fake, in a sense, in layman's terms, but it was always going to be the real authentic me. And so from there, the team liked me, and here we are now, almost a year later, and I'm working for the New York Jets.
Yeah, I can feel the pride and see the pride in your face when you talk about that. So,
Mhm.
for a journalism job, or for this really a production job, did you have to
Mhm.
prepare reels, portfolio? I mean,
Mhm.
what basically convinced the Jets that you were the guy?
Yeah, so I had always made highlight tapes or reels or whatever the case may have been, as far as like my journey went. I never put it down, as Phil may have mentioned, who's also one of my biggest mentors, if not my mentor. He always told me that you needed to keep your portfolio up to date. So no matter where I was working, I was always trying to make sure that I was putting out reels or highlight tapes or just trying small things on the side. Like I think one time I was shooting a church event, and I was like, I've never done this before, but I'm going to always keep my portfolio up to date. And so as I continue on, it never was like a lost at what I was doing. And now, as far as the cameras went, cameras developed and got more advanced and far more advanced than I ever seen. And so when I got here, one thing about me is I'm gonna always learn quickly because I know how quickly the job can move and how quickly things can change. And so I'm always open to learning. One thing I live by is being a student of the game, student of life. So anytime somebody's teaching you something, you should always be like a sponge.
I want to get back to your relationship with Philip in a minute, but you said something that I kind of want to pull back on. You said you sent over 1,000 applications and all that.
Yes.
One of the things that I
Yes.
talk about all the time is you just have to be prepared to kiss a lot of frogs.
Get prepared.
When you're trying to get that job, you've got to put yourself out there. Is that how you felt? Did somebody really tell you, hey, you gotta put it out there to bring it back? Was that really how it went for you?
Yes, and it honestly started with my parents, my brothers, my fraternity brothers, which is how I know
Right.
Phil, and they will always push me to because at that time I didn't really have a lot of confidence in myself, and so I always needed like that push, like yo, you're gonna be fine. Just keep pushing at it, and especially with a young kid that's trying to fulfill his dreams, he's doing X, Y, and Z, and it's not making sense. And then he's seeing his peers, go higher than what he expected them to, but he wanted to be on that same level. And so if I looked back now and saw my younger self, I would tell him like, just be patient. Please be patient because you're gonna get to where you're gonna get where you want. You just have to be patient. And we as the younger people, a lot of times we don't have patience because we want to do the next thing immediately. It's like when you looking online to buy something, you see it, but you want to say, hold on, I don't want it just yet, but we're gonna push to get it that immediately. You know what I mean? So just being patient, patience throughout that whole process was my main thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you and Neil have both referenced your mentor, Phil. That's
Hmm.
Philip Wilkerson for anyone who
Yep.
hasn't listened to the previous
Great guy,
podcast.
by the way.
We spoke to him.
Excellent,
That's my
excellent
guy.
interview with Philip. Really super informative, really valuable. And we were
Hmm.
before you came onto the show, we were talking about the Get in the Game conference. We're looking forward to having
Hmm.
Philip join us for Get in the Game.
And a tidbit about Phil is Phil, when I was coming through the chapter, Phil literally took me under his wing. He looked at me as his younger brother because Phil was doing what I wanted to get into. He was already into the broadcast world. It may have been in the college realm, but at the time I was just trying to get in. So he was always giving me tidbits. He even put me on his podcast one time. And then we used to always throw ideas of how we can make his podcast better, how I can start my own podcast. I never fell through with that, but he always was giving me tidbits on the journalism world, whether that was sports, whether that was politics, whether that was just random things going on in the world. And if you've ever seen Phil's podcast, it's literally just random things in the world, and he gets a lot of attention from that. And so I want to give a huge shout out to Phil because if it wasn't for him, then I honestly wouldn't know how to maneuver what I'm doing now.
The word mentorship has come up a lot in the last couple of episodes.
Hmm.
It came up back in episode 13 with Jasmine Cunningham. It came up with Philip, and now it's coming up with you. Tell everyone how important it is to try to find that right mentor that really helps to set you on
Hmm.
the right course.
One thing about mentorship is we always want to find a mentor, right? So sometimes we're quick to jump on the first mentor, but finding that mentor that can relate to you, maybe not in the same age, but has been through the same thing as you, that is who you should relate or you should call your mentor for the most part, because now anytime you get in a rut, anytime you get low, anytime you feel like the job is not doing what it needs to be, they are the person that you should turn to and be like, man, listen, I know for a fact you've been through this, so help me maneuver this because I'm not understanding how to. And so again, finding that mentor that's almost like family to you as opposed to looking at them as a mentor, then that's how usually you get the good products of like me and Phil in a sense. That's how I'm such a good product of him because of the way he paved the way for me.
Yeah, I think, look, I was very fortunate in my career to have a number of good mentors. And that's one thing I would say to you
Hmm.
and to anyone, in the early phase of their career is I think at different phases of your career at different companies, you're going to have different mentors. And some
Hmm.
people are very conscious of that role, like Philip, who will consciously take you under his wing and give you advice. And other people,
Hmm.
you really just learn from talking to them and following what they do. And particularly for someone like me who spent a lot of time in a corporate environment, look, in a corporate environment, it's nice to have somebody who kind of watches out for you. And I
Right.
was fortunate to have that. So that would be my advice to anyone starting their career journey right now is you're going to have different mentors at different phases of your life. And
Hmm.
Jordan, like you said, be a student, soak it up, learn what you
Yep.
can from who you can.
Hmm.
Jordan, are you looking forward to being a mentor for the next generation or the next person that kind of comes along? Is that something that, you've kind of got, in the scope, so to speak?
Yes, I absolutely am. One of the main things, one of the things that I'm passionate about is the younger generation. That's why I was a teacher for 2 years. I feel like kids can relate to me, especially kids from low income areas. When I was growing up, my mom started off with 2 kids and was living in a dorm with a husband, and so it was like, if she can get through that and all while having 3 kids total, then I should be able to do the same thing when it comes to the younger generation. Like, hey, I've been there. I know what it feels like, and I've also been on the side of down and out, not knowing what my next move going to be, not knowing if I want to see the next day. You know what I mean? So I can
Wow.
relate on a much
Wow.
deeper level when it comes to stuff like that. And to be at the space I am now, I always want to give back. One of the main things I want to do is give back. And so, especially for people from the South that feel like you get stuck in such a rotation that you don't want to see the world. And one thing I want to tell the younger generation is see the world. No matter where you're from, just see the world. One thing that I'm pushing to do now is to travel outside of the country. I have yet to be outside of the country, but I'm pushing to do so. And so see the world. You'll learn more things. You'll learn more cultures. You'll learn what you like and don't like. You'll learn what type of job you like, what type of jobs you don't like. And so just seeing the world kind of push things in perspective for what you want to do in life.
So, Jordan, I do hope you get to travel outside the United States, and maybe the Jets
Do-
can help
Are
you
they
with that.
playing?
Maybe the Jets will eventually
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
be on that international program where the league is
Hmm.
playing games in the United Kingdom, and
Germany.
I understand
Hmm.
Germany is the next market they'll be moving into.
Yep.
So
Right.
maybe you'll be flying over there with the Jets. So, Jordan, one other thing you mentioned that I wanted to follow up on is you did come from pretty humble beginnings. I love in your bio how you say you came from backwoods Mississippi. So,
Yes.
two things. Number one, where do you find sort of the courage to go to a place, Dartmouth? You probably, like you said, you had
Mhm.
no idea where it was. And
Right.
now you're living in Jersey City, which is a very
Mhm.
urban environment, probably very different than you grew up in. So, talk a little bit more on the personal aspect of those two moves and sort of how you found the sort of courage and fortitude and how you're adjusting.
So honestly, I didn't have the courage to go to Dartmouth, and I hope my mom sees this. But my I want to say it was around like 11:30 at night, and got the call earlier in that day that Dartmouth was gonna give me the job and everything, and so I already came off like not making somewhat good decisions in my future self, and so I just remember sitting in my room and just crying, like just crying bad, and I couldn't take it no more, so I walked over into my parents' room. They were both knocked out. Mind you, my parents go to sleep early. So I walked in and I just stood there just crying. And I remember my mom popping up and she was like, what's wrong? What's wrong? I'm like, I don't know if I'm making the right decisions. Like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing. I feel like I keep making bad decisions and it's just not adding up for me. And literally, my mom sat me down and was like, hey, Dartmouth is going to be the right decision if you make it the right decision. If you don't, then you have to be satisfied with that decision of not going up there. And so I took exactly what she said, went to Dartmouth and was like, y'all gonna have to make sure that I'm pushing in the right direction I'm supposed to. And again, when it came to Dartmouth, they literally took me in as one of their own and made that transition smooth sailing because like I said earlier, I've never been to New Hampshire or Vermont. So to
Mhm.
kind of understand what it's like up there, understood none of that, didn't understand the coach out there and none of that. And so what helped was the people I surrounded myself with, my boss, a lot of my coworkers, some of the coaches. Some of the coaches got really close with me, and that it was all almost like a family up there at Dartmouth. And most would know that because Dartmouth is so far north that who's gonna just up and move to Vermont or New Hampshire, you know what I mean? And so that's why I'm forever indebted to that space, because I feel personally that God put me in a space where I needed to be to kind of understand myself. It was slow paced. I didn't have the rush of the city, the outside life. Of course, Boston is nearby, and I used to go there on the weekends. But other than that, no, it helped me slow down and understand what it was I wanted to fulfill in life. And literally every other week, my boss was meeting with me and was like, "Hey, wanted to make sure you was doing good. Wanted to make sure you was doing good," and that helped in the long run. So it wasn't an easy transition, but ultimately it helped me get me where I needed to go.
No, that's a great story.
It is a great
That's a
story.
great story. And I appreciate you sharing. And I think, look,
No
whether
problem.
sometimes we need it from our parents or a friend, but
Mhm.
every once in a while, particularly early in your career, I think you need the support to take that leap of
Mhm.
faith. Because when you do take a job, particularly when it requires moving, it does
Right.
require some courage and trust in
Mhm.
yourself to pull it off.
And earlier you asked me about advice I would give to younger generation. Take a chance. Take a chance on yourself. I know it may not be the place you want to go, but take the chance. That may be the calling you need.
If you had to talk to the younger Jordan McGrigg and went back and said, look, maybe you should have done this, or maybe you should have taken these courses when you were in college, or is there anything that you can tell students that they should, consider maybe while you're in school, take this type of course or that type of course, or this type of experience or that type of experience? Do you have something that you could tell, the younger generation, or you'd even tell the younger version of Jordan McGrigg?
So to answer that first portion of it, what I would tell my younger self, like one of our players here said, Will McDonald, he said, I would tell my younger self, don't change nothing you're doing. You have to go through what you're going through to get to where you want to be. And I resonated that with that for a long time, because a lot of times in the moment, we don't see what is being set up for us in the future. And so, with that being said, we get blinded by certain things. So, you may detour off, and then that detour will set you right back to where you need to be. Sometimes you need that detour. And so, I would tell my younger self, the the storm is only but for so long, for so long. So stay on the course. And what I would tell the younger generation themselves is put yourself out there. Like don't hold back. Have confidence in yourself. One thing about jobs, they love people with confidence in themselves. Now, don't be
Mhm.
overly confident. There's a difference, but have confidence in yourself. Speak well. Speak to your personality. Speak to others. You know what I mean? So that would be like the main thing I would tell the younger generation.
Sounds like you've really been able to learn kind of hard skills, whether it's writing, whether
Hmm.
it's speaking, things like that. And
Hmm.
I give you a lot of credit for focusing on both hard skills as well as soft skills. I think you're going to make a great
Yeah.
mentor, by the way, someday.
Thank you.
Now the
Thank
only
you. I
downside of
appreciate
this
it,
whole
Neil.
thing is that you are with the New York Jets. I am a Miami Dolphin fan. I've held my tongue for this entire show, but now I'll take my one
Hmm.
shot
As
at
you
the
should.
Jets,
As
and
you
then I'm
should.
going to move on.
Okay, I definitely accept that for sure. For sure.
Jordan, tell us a little bit about your day to day, what you're doing with the Jets. I mean, if you could kind of just, give us a little bit of the kind of the GPS of the day for Jordan McGrigg.
So as a studio assistant, I actually would be on the opposite end of the camera right now. This is my first time in front of a camera, but again, I'm the studio assistant, as well as the daily digital producer. So a lot of my duties come from editing podcasts, shooting the podcast, editing live shows, as well as shooting the live shows. So anything that happens in the studio, I'm kind of one of the main hands on deck for that. Right now, we have a team of three, and so yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell as far as the studio goes. And daily digital producing is more of the editing side of things. So anything our website needs, our YouTube page needs, any of that stuff will come from me, if not our other two staff members.
So, Jordan, I have a question for you. I mean, look, you're a young guy and you're around some of the best athletes in the world, some big personalities and some,
Mr. Rogers.
superstars. How do you not get starstruck? Or is that something they talk to you about? Like, hey, when you show up for your first week on the job, you can't go over and ask Sauce Gardner for his autograph. So
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about that and what your interaction is with the athletes.
So, first things first, I love that question because I get asked that question a lot. Reason I don't get starstruck is because I have played with star athletes, Tariq Cohen, Tony McGrigg. They all been in the league. They've all been stars in the league. And so I haven't really been the type of person to be starstruck by another human being. Now, does their talent and their personality exceeds themselves? Absolutely. But I kind of just look at them as another person. And we all know to the outside world, they're not another person. But when you treat that athlete that way, then they treat you as a human being. And so I've always taken that with my personality when I came here. Literally the first day on my job, my boss let me help out with the shoot for Sauce Gardner. And I act as if he was just Sauce Gardner playing for the Jets and not Sauce Gardner of the NFL. You get what I'm saying? And he absolutely owns that right to him being Sauce Gardner of the NFL. But I always take it as they're another human being and they're going to make this team great, every single one of them. So I don't really get starstruck. I thought I was going to get starstruck with Aaron Rodgers, but again, I can't let it show. But I will say, if I was in that position, if I was not in this position, I definitely would be starstruck seeing him on the street or something like that. I'd be like, that's Aaron Rodgers. But that's about as far as I go. I probably wouldn't try to take a picture or anything like that.
And look, I think that's an important thing for any, I think a lot of young people want to work in sports because they want to meet athletes. But I think learning how to conduct yourself around athletes, and it sounds like you have it figured out, that's an important thing. I mean, the first time you act like a starstruck fan, that's not a good career. So let's serve that up as some career advice right now.
Another thing too, I look at it from the player standpoint. Imagine if I work for this player and I'm constantly acting like a fan, then eventually he's gonna be like, man, y'all gonna have to do something about bro, because he's just doing the most. And so I never want that to be labeled to me, especially when my personality isn't even like that. You know what I mean? So I definitely look at it from a player standpoint as well.
Jordan, Mark and I want to truly thank you for being on this episode of My First Job in Sports. You are an inspiration.
No problem.
And you are somebody that, I believe, students can really look up to really understand, what it's all about and how to get that all important first job in sports. Jordan, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Jordan, thank you, and let's go Jets. Look forward to seeing some of your playoff videos this year.
Jets.
Oh, God. I was so afraid that was going to happen.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of My First Job in Sports, presented by SBR.net. You can check out the video version on the SBR.net Video Corner on YouTube. You can also catch the audio version on all major podcast platforms. Just search for My First Job in Sports. My First Job in Sports is produced by Brad Mabey. You can connect with us on all social media platforms, including Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, or check us out at sbrnet.com. Thank you for tuning in.